What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Goods. I'm your boy, Joshua Lipinski-McHale, and here we are, guys, at the halfway mark of the NFL season right now in Week 8. I hope all your fantasy teams are doing well. If not, I'm here to help you out. I'm going to give you the goods. I'm going to be getting into our weekly injuries and waiver wire claims. Before I begin, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and don't forget, leave me a comment when you're done watching the video. Let me know what you guys think. If you have any questions on players you want to pick up or lineups, drop them there, and I'll do my best to answer them. So here we are, Week 8, not much different from every other week this year, where there's another either big injury or big name going down. This time it's both. OBJ, torn ACL, done for the year. He was targeted on that one Baker Mayfield interception, went to go try and make a tackle, got caught up in some defenders, and tore his ACL. Unfortunately, he's done for the year. Now, look, he wasn't doing that fantastic anyway, but you're definitely going to miss that volume if you had him. Now, a guy that I'm looking at to replace that volume on this offense would probably be Rashard Higgins. He caught all 6 of his targets last week for 110 yards. And I think that might be enough to win him that other outside job at wide receiver across from Jarvis Landry. And this guy has flashed a couple times in the past in this offense. So if there's anyone on that offense that I'm willing to take a shot on, it would probably be him. Next down the list, I got to talk about him. He was the former number 1 overall pick this year. CMC has a shot to come back this week, guys. CMC owners, I know, finally, right? I mean, look, it's a Thursday night game, so that's probably the one big reason why it's still a question mark. If it was Sunday, he'd probably most likely be back. But because it's an early game in the week, he's still questionable whether they're going to activate him or not. So you're going to have to pay attention to that. But there's hope. We got Chubb and Eckler still out. Pretty much the entire 49ers starting running back committee. I mean, Mostert out on IR again. You still got Coleman out on IR. And then Jeff Wilson, who had a great game last week, wound up getting hurt in that game after he ran 17 carries, 112 yards, 3 touchdowns, and caught both of his targets for 8 yards, totaling 32 fantasy points. So really unfortunate that you lose him if you had him in your lineup. But obviously, like I mentioned last week, the guy to have, Jerick McKinnon right now, because he's pretty much the only guy that's had that starting experience in this offense already. And then if you want to take a dark horse shot on somebody, it's going to be JaMycal Hasty, the guy that they signed from the practice squad. He put up 9 points last week, but I think maybe he gets a little more of a workload this week since him and McKinnon are pretty much the only options now. Next, I'm going to talk about Chris Godwin, who's going to be out for Week 8 after he broke his index finger last week and needed to get surgery on it to repair. He has a possibility to be back for Week 9, but he's definitely out this week. So if you're looking for somebody, I'd go and get Scotty Miller. I know everyone's saying, oh, AB. AB's not back yet. AB can't play Week 8. He's still suspended. So he's not going to be back till Week 9. So obviously if you don't have Mike Evans owners, good for you. You got Mike Evans being the number 1 receiver going against the Giants defense. If you don't have him, you can go out and get Scotty Miller, who also had a great game last week, catching 6 of 9 targets for 109 yards and a touchdown. Next guy I'll get into is Kenyon Drake, who went down in that amazing Sunday night game. I hope you guys watch it. It was fantastic. Overtime, 2 great teams and a great division going at it, and it came down to almost the last play of the game, 25 seconds, and Cardinals wound up winning it with a field goal. But Drake wound up slightly tearing some ligaments in his ankle. I mean, if you watched the game, you kind of saw him crying and sobbing a little bit on the sideline. But here we go. It's Chase Edmonds' time to shine, guys. If you have him, if you've stashed him, good for you. If he's out there on waiver wires somehow, go and get him. He didn't do much to talk about in the running game, but it was a very pass-heavy game, and he caught 7 of 7 targets for 87 yards against the Seahawks. So I'd like to see what he could do this week and going forward, seeing if he could actually solidify himself as the starter in this offense. You got Deebo Samuel out. He's said to have a significant hamstring strain, and he'll be out till at least Week 10. Then you got Chris Carson, who also went down early in that game, and he could miss a week or two, but is day-to-day with a mid-foot sprain. Next big name is Michael Thomas. He was slated to come back. Unfortunately, he wound up missing last week for a hamstring injury, and after an MRI, he's said to have a grade 1 hamstring strain, which is just 1 grade under what Austin Eckler has for his hamstring, where he's out for that prolonged time. So Thomas is still not ready to come back this week. So if you have Michael Thomas, you better think about having somebody else in your lineup right now. And I think the guy to have is Traquan Smith right now. But there are a couple other wide receivers who flashed last week that I do like in this offense, like Marquez Callaway, and Dante Harris. So if you're really looking for somebody to replace that Emmanuel Sanders and Michael Thomas volume in this offense, those are the guys that I'm looking at. We have another big name, Allen Robinson, who is right now in concussion protocol. He wound up getting hit from behind late in that game, and then his face hit the turf. Kind of looked like he might have went out, but I'm not really too sure. I did see the play, but he wound up popping up right afterwards. He looked like he was all right. I mean, I would expect him to play after seeing what I saw, but I'm no doctor, so you're going to have to pay attention to his practice availability and see what he is going into this week. Miles Sanders is probable to come back this week, but I wouldn't be surprised if they sat him and let him rest all the way through their week 9 bye. So Miles Sanders owners, again, watch his availability in practice going into this week. Dalvin Cook, still questionable, but most likely playing. He's coming out of his bye. I think they're going to start putting him back in. I'm pretty sure he's going to play this week. Aaron Jones, another one that is questionable, but I think will play this week. He was probable to play week 7. They almost started him, but the Green Bay training staff is known for being very conservative with soft tissue injuries. So I'm sure they just sat him to be on the safe side, but I'm almost sure that he's going to play for us this week, guys. Joe Mixon is slated as day-to-day with his foot injury. So if you do have him, I'd go out and get Giovanni Bernard if he's available, but I'm sure somebody had him last week, and he did a great job. So Giovanni Bernard's the guy to have here. There's really no one else to go to other than him, so sorry if you don't got him, you beat. And finally, like I mentioned before, Emmanuel Sanders is still out with COVID-19. Now look, this is different from the Cam Newton and the Patriots and the Titans all having those COVID-19 scares. Everybody that was diagnosed on those teams were asymptomatic, meaning they didn't really show symptoms, while Emmanuel Sanders wound up having a fever and cough showing symptoms, so he is mandatorily having a 10-day quarantine before he can be tested again, and then at that point he's got to have 2 consecutive negative tests for COVID-19 before he could come back to practice. So you're going to have to monitor that, but I don't expect him back this week, possibly next week. So make sure you have a backup plan. One of those 3 receivers I mentioned before, Traquan Smith, Marquez Callaway, or Dante Harris. And that'll do it for the injury report right now, guys. Let's get right into some waiver claims for you. I'm going to give you my top 5 waiver claims for week 8. And number 1, like I mentioned before, is going to be Rashard Higgins, the wide receiver for the Browns, who caught all 6 of his targets for 110 yards last week. Like I said, he's flashed in the past. He's had a couple big games here and there. And to be honest with you, he kind of reminds me of Tim Patrick on the Broncos. And the big thing is Baker Mayfield looked like he might have finally clicked, like he might have found a way to win with this Cleveland Browns team, even without OBJ, even without Austin Hooper, even without Nick Chubb. So I'd like to pick this guy up, especially with a couple easy matchups coming up over the next couple weeks. I'd grab him and I'd throw him in my flex in a couple of those matchups. Next, speaking of Browns players, Baker Mayfield. Now look, if you don't have a good backup quarterback, or if your quarterback is hurt or on a bye, I'd go out and get Baker Mayfield. Like I said, it looks like he might have finally clicked. He had 39.78 fantasy points last week, throwing 5 touchdowns, almost 300 yards. He did have a pick, but still, that's great. 5-to-1 ratio, I'll take that any day. I know it was Cincinnati, but he also has a couple of really easy matchups coming up over the next 5 weeks. In Las Vegas, Houston, then he has a bye, Philadelphia, and then Jacksonville. So I'd like to grab him and see if maybe he could string together a couple wins and a couple really good games. Have him on your bench and maybe play them if he shows some consistency. And remember, guys, this guy was a Heisman winner, one of the best players in college, and the number 1 overall pick. So he's got the talent. It's just he hasn't put it all together yet. So I'd give this guy a shot if you got an open spot on your bench. And like I said, if you have a bye week quarterback coming up, I grab him. Next, number 3, I got Carlos Hyde. Now look, Chris Carson owners, you got to try and get this guy. When Chris Carson went down last week, he took over the leading role. He had 15 carries for 60-something yards, a couple catches and targets, and a touchdown. It wasn't a fantastic day, but he put up RB2 numbers, and he's definitely going to wind up being the bell cow there, in my opinion, while Carson's down. Look, this is exactly why they signed Carlos Hyde, because Chris Carson gets nicked up. It just happens. And Carlos Hyde has been pretty dependable everywhere he's been, from 49ers to the Texans, and now here we are in Seattle, where he's got that good backup role, and he gives you decent points when he gets the touches. So I'd take a shot on him. Disclaimer here, he has a couple tough matchups coming up over the next 4 weeks with San Francisco, Buffalo, the Rams, and then the Cardinals again. I'm not 100% worried about that because this offense will move. Russ Cooks Russ moves this offense. They're going to be throwing passes downfield. People are going to be worried about DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, and it's going to open up the middle of the field for Carlos Hyde to run. So I'd go and get him and put him in a flex or even an RB2 spot if you're in need there. The next pickup I'm going to give you guys is Scotty Miller, the wide receiver for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He had 22.9 points last week, catching 6 of his 9 targets for 109 yards and a touchdown. Now, like I said before, Chris Godwin is out week 8 and possibly out week 9, and Antonio Brown can't come back to week 9. So you got Mike Evans there, and someone else has to play at wide receiver. It's probably going to be this guy. I feel like Scotty Miller is Tom Brady's new Danny Amendola. You know, that no-name, small little white guy who he just peppers with targets, and he makes something out of nothing. Another reason I like him going into this week is because they're going against the New York Giants. And even though the Giants' defense, I think, is the better part of that team, I don't think it's going to be enough to stop this Tampa Bay offense at all. So I'd go and get Scotty Miller. If you need a plug and play at flex this week, or if you lost Chris Godwin, go get him, replace that volume. I'd trust him right here this week. And finally, I'm going to give you my last guy, Nelson Aguilar. Now, this guy was a joke when he was in Philly. You know, there was memes about him dropping balls and whatever.
My man just started throwing babies out the window. We was catching them, unlike Aguilar.
But he's doing a great job here in Las Vegas. He had 21.7 fantasy points last week going against Tampa Bay, which is a pretty tough defense, catching 5 of his 9 targets for 107 yards and a touchdown. He seems to be the number 1 receiver in this offense because he gets the most targets. And in his last 3 outings, he's put up double-digit fantasy points. And I like his matchup this week going against Cleveland, who's given up the second most point to wide receivers in fantasy. So I'd go out and get Nelson Aguilar and plug him in my flex, see what he gives me. All right, guys, that does it for my Week 8 waiver wire pickups, and that does it for this episode of the Fantasy Goods. Thank you for watching. Don't forget, like, subscribe, drop a comment. Let me know what you think of the video. If you have any questions, find us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at The Fantasy Goods. And any questions for your lineups, if you're interested in somebody on the waiver that you're not sure if you want to pick up, shoot that question over to us, and we'll do our best to get back to you. But until next time, this was The Fantasy Goods, and we got the goods.